every word, every act. His assurance and His love. Why fear when I am here, He said. For every devotee, He is here, there, and everywhere. Painfully guiding every step like a dance teacher. As the bud blossomed to reveal 1,000 petals, it can only be said that the fragrance of the first few years is unique. When you look at many of these devotees, it's so fascinating how in different ways Swami convinces different devotees. Professor Kasturi's daughter once, when we interviewed her, she narrated this incident. Somebody like Professor Kasturi who moved so closely with Swami physically, we would believe that he must have seen some phenomenal things, and it's very difficult for him to put his finger on one thing and say, this is why I believe Swami is God. But there is an incident, you'll realize that probably it's not as exciting as many of the incidents narrated, but the response was so different from somebody like Professor Kasturi. Apparently one day he was in the interview room with Swami and Swami suddenly went out of his body. He went into, what sometimes it would be called as bhavam, closed his eyes and his hand in his mudra, and Swami was lost. It was a good 1 hour or more than that. Then Swami came back and the devotees around were eager to know where Swami had gone. So Swami said, I went to Bombay, there was a devotee in such and such a place and she was not well, I went to save her. She's in a hospital. So Professor Kasturi very shyly and sheepishly asked, Swami, can I note down the details? He said. Swami said, of course, note down. So he took down the name of the person, the name of the hospital admitted in and the disease and the nature, and when Swami exactly went and saved that person. So this incident passed. About a week later, Swami calls Professor Kasturi and Swami says, read this letter. So there was a letter somebody had addressed to Swami. So Professor Kasturi opens this letter and reads, it's from that very same devotee Swami had gone to save. So she had apparently written the entire description of how she was dying and Swami came and saved her, and it exactly matched with the details he had noted down. From the incidents we've narrated, this is just another one drop in the ocean, right? But that day, Professor Kasturi comes back home and he is in a sort of a delirium. He's lost, he's not talking to anybody, he's not drinking water, he's not eating food. He's saying Anandam, 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 Paramanandam, Brahmanandam. And his mother is saying and his wife is saying, what's wrong with him? And they get really scared, what has happened? And he goes on saying, we are living with God, we are living with God. Do you realize? We are living with that Parabrahman himself. So that evening, Professor Kasturi's mother, she sits for darshan, and as Swami comes, she says, Swami, what's happened to my son? He's gone mad. He's not eating food. He's going on repeating this. He's not sleeping. And Swami tells her, don't worry. When you come face to face with truth, you will lose your balance a bit. Because the faith is there. As Swami would say, the faith is always there, but it's the reason which covers it. So when a devotee tries to test the Lord, there is this, it's a different kind of a duel. You take on this duel with the Lord, a duel which you wish that the Lord wins and wins you over, isn't it? But in those days in Bukkapatnam, imagine Swami had no place to go. He did not want to stay in Subhama's house because he was troubling her. Nobody was ready to give Swami a place of land in Puttaparthi. Nobody wanted Swami in Bukkapatnam. So what would Swami do? Swami started living in the caves. This is, I think, the Kalpavriksha in those days. There used to be a cave under this tree and Swami used to spend months and months in that cave. One person bending down can enter this cave. And Swami would spend months in that cave. And across Chitravati, there's a village, Janakampalli, it's still there. Swami would go to that village, and apparently there's a cave where Swami spent 6 months at a stretch, coming out only to go on his trips. Imagine, Swami goes to Bangalore. Swami stays with people like Thirumal Rao, who's got a huge bungalow right in the center of the city. Swami goes to some other devotees. There's a devotee called Ankamma. You would see she has a huge house. Swami stays there. In the later years, Swami will go and stay in with the royal families, but he comes back to Puttaparthi and stays in caves. In fact, a few devotees would say that Swami would write letters to them from the caves. Swami would say, I came back from Bangalore on such and such a day, but I've not gone back to the village. I'm staying in this cave. Such was the hostility, and Swami was staying there. And I think the last time we spoke about how Subbamma was so concerned, she would wonder if Swami is staying in the cave, what about his food? She would carry the food and she would climb up each and every hill that Swami would probably be staying in and carrying that food, offering food to Swami. And Swami would say,
ఆ గ్రామం యొక్క ప్రాపర్టీ అంతా కూడాను సుబ్బమ్మ పేరుతోనే ఉంది.
The whole property in that village belongs to her.
అలాంటి ఆ పెద్ద ఆమెను అందరు కూడాను గౌరవించేటువంటి వారే.
All respected Subbamma.
కానీ స్వామిని వచ్చి చేర్చిన తర్వాత ఎవ్వరి ముఖము చూచలేదు ఆమె.
But ever since she met Swami, she didn't care anymore.
తెల్లవారు లేచినది మొదలుకొని రాత్రి పరుండునంత వరకు కూడాను స్వామి పనులే, స్వామి పనులే, స్వామి పనులే.
Right from dawn to dusk, she attended all jobs, works associated with Swami.
నేను అప్పుడప్పుడు చెప్పకుండా ఎక్కడైనా బయటికి పోయినప్పుడు కొండలంతా తిరిగేటువంటిది పాపం ఆమె.
When Bhagavan left this place without telling anybody, she used to search for Bhagavan.
ఒక బ్యాగ్ లోపల
in a bag
ఒక టిఫిన్ క్యారీ పెట్టుకొని
with a tiffin carrier inside.
ఉప్మా, దోశ, వడ, ఇడ్లీ ఇవన్నీ చేర్చుకొని పెట్టుకునేటువంటిది పాపం.
With that carrier, upma, vada, idli, she was carrying that.
దోశ కూడా పెట్టుకునేటువంటిది,
including dosa.
అక్కడ పోతానే స్వామి ఏం తెచ్చావు అని అడిగితే నేనేమి చెప్పాలి? స్వామి మీకు ఏది ఇష్టమో అది తెచ్చాను.
Supposing if Swami asks, what is that you brought for me? Well, she should be in a position to say, Swami, whatever you relish.
నాకు దోశ ఇచ్చేసేయి అన్నాను.
Swami said, give me dosa.
దాన్ని ఒక తట్టలో పెట్టి నాకు అందించింది.
She served it in a plate and gave it to Bhagavan.
సుబ్బమ్మ, ఈ దోశ నాకు బాగలేదు.
Swami said, Subbamma, this dosa is not nice.
నాకు ఇడ్లీ పెట్టు అన్నాను.
I want idli.
ఇడ్లీ కూడాను వడ్డించింది.
She served idli also.
నాకు ఈ ఇడ్లీ కూడాను అక్కర్లేదు అన్నాను.
Swami said, I don't want idli now.
ఉప్మా పెట్టు అన్నాను.
Then I want upma.
ఉప్మా కూడా పెట్టింది.
She served upma now.
తెల్లవారు లేచినప్పటి నుంచి ఈ రకరకాల యొక్క పిండి వంటలంతా చేసి నా కోసం కాచుకొని ఉండేటువంటి సుబ్బమ్మ.
In fact, she prepares all these things right from the morning and waiting for Bhagavan.
ఇంకా ఏమడుగుతాడో ఏమో అని భయం పాపం సుబ్బమ్మకు.
Because she was not sure what Swami would ask.
సుబ్బమ్మ, నీవేం భయపడనక్కర్లేదు.
And Bhagavan said, Subbamma, don't fear.
నీ యొక్క భక్తి ప్రపత్తులు భవిష్యత్తులో ఇతరులకు చెప్పాలనే ఉద్దేశంతోనే నేను ఇన్ని ప్రశ్నలు వేశాను.
I asked these questions. I have put these questions because in future the world should know your sincerity of devotion.
అప్పుడు తర్వాత స్వామి, మీరు తీసుకున్నారు కానీ నాకు కొంచెం వడ్డించండి అనింది పాపం.
Bhagavan, you accepted, but kindly serve little to me.
అప్పుడు నేనే ఇడ్లీని ఓ చట్నీతో అద్ది కొంతవరకు ఆమె నోట్లో పెట్టాను.
And Swami served her idli along with chutney.
ఈ విధంగా ఆమె అంత్య సమయం అంతా కూడాను చాలా ఆనందంగా గడుపుకుంది పాపం.
She has spent all these days, including the last moment, blissfully.
If you look back, why was Swami doing this? Swami could have probably gone and settled in Mysore. Swami could have settled in Bangalore. Swami could have gone and settled in Gindi. There was Gindi temple because Loknath Mudaliar wanted to build a house for Swami on that plot in Gindi. He could have gone and settled anywhere. Why? Because he gave a promise to his mother. He said, I will not leave Puttaparthi. Sadly, today we question this promise. But imagine, whatever was the obstacle which came his way, he stuck to it. He went and stayed in caves. He was ready to stay in a hut which people could come and set fire to. Why? Because He had given a word to Ishwarama that whatever comes, whoever calls me, Puttaparthi will be the place I always live in.
When it was going on like this, we had already spoken about this Chidgananda Maharaj. He had his little ashram in Kottacheru. He got to know about Swami being driven out of all the villages, having no place to stay. So for the first time, he made a visit to Puttaparthi. He came to Puttaparthi and he told the parents that, if you don't mind, see, nobody wants him, right? I will take him. I will take him as my Shishya and he will be fine. You will all be away from him. Don't worry. I will take him back. Ishwarama could not bear this. You know, at that time, Karnam Subama was already very sick. So Karnam Kamalamma rushes to Subama and she says, do you remember our husband had said that from our family side we have to build a temple for the Lord. Before he could fulfill that desire, the husband had died. The Karnam had passed away. She said, I think this is the time to fulfill our husband's promise. Let us build a temple for the Lord. And what better temple to build than a home, than a house for our Swami to stay. So the minute Karnam Subama heard this, though she was sick, she immediately agreed for this. She said, yes, let us do this. Immediately they had a piece of land today where the Pathamandiram stands. Actually, if you see the old Puttaparthi map, the southern end of Puttaparthi is the Hanuman temple. Today, the Hanuman temple is the northern end of Puttaparthi. Everything that we see is built later on because Swami was given a piece of land outside Puttaparthi. They went and registered this land. They said, Swami, you are now outside Puttaparthi. Nobody can have a problem. Here we'll build a hut for you. Here you please stay. Here we'll have a home for you. And this photograph is of the sale deed where it is written that nobody will claim anything from this. The only thing that we claim is the punyam that we receive by doing this, because they were also greedy for that merit that comes from serving the Lord. Nothing else they wanted, so they offered this land to Swami. And there were two people. This is Tunga Gangappa, Swami's classmate, and Narsi Reddy. So along with two other friends, Chakala Subbanna and Chinna Obanna, these four, they go on the bullock cart, cross the Chitravati, go to a hillock nearby, get all the necessary wood and stones and come. Just using wet mud as the binding agent, they built. And even as they built, they were, really wonderstruck, because 5-6 years back, this boy here was our classmate. And today, the Karnam of the village is donating a land to him in his own name. And we are building a home for him. So they said, Sathya, please, sorry, we are calling you Sathya, but what should we call you, man? What should we address you as? You've become big. Swami said, you don't worry, you will see everything. How it will keep changing and how it will keep growing, you will witness all that. And they were blessed enough to witness all this. So they built up this first kind of a mandir, and Swami used to live there. But when the devotees from Bangalore came and saw, as he said, they were engineers, they were horticulturists, they were owning prime real estate in Bangalore, and they see that their Lord is living in a home built of stone and clay. They said, Swami, please, we will build, Swami, your land is yours, we will just build a mandir here. And once Swami agreed, immediately they got that structure demolished. Today looking back, I feel possibly to give those 4 people that chance to do something for Swami, to build for Swami. Possibly that old mandir had come, it lasted only for a month or 2. It was broken down and then they did an elaborate groundbreaking ceremony to construct the mandir. These are some of the pictures that were taken on the day of the groundbreaking ceremony for the new mandir. This is the land where the Pathamandiram today stands. With this, the construction of the Pathamandiram began.
These were the main devotees who contributed. It is said that they came 4 days before this groundbreaking ceremony, and the foundation stone had to be laid. And it was done on the Janmashtami of 1945. So on that particular day, there was another worker who was employed. He had to come and dig for the foundation stone to be laid. His name was Guni Venkata. Guni because he was a hunchback. Swami came by and Swami said, okay, dig in this spot, we'll have the foundation stone laying here. So he comes and he starts digging there, and when they dig, they find that there are a lot of, we've all seen the Shiva Lingam. There is something called a pitam on which the lingam is kept. There is a base, there is a stand on which the lingam is kept. So when they dug this particular place, they found that there were about dozens and dozens of those pitams without the lingams. And they were wondering, what is this? Only the pitams are there, because you might find a lingam without the pitam, but it's very rare to find a pitam without the lingam. So they decide, okay, why not we dig a little more? Maybe there are lingams, somewhere else. So when they do that, Swami said, no, don't worry, don't bother, don't search for it, because all the lingams are here, Swami says. Very mysteriously, and nobody knew what Swami was referring to. Very shortly, probably in about 2 or 3 years after that, Swami started the Lingodbhavam during Shivratris. And as we said, these are the devotees who, most of them, who contributed. There was Thirumal Rao we spoke about. He was the person who was almost driving the project, and he brought the mason and the supervisor, and most of the main resources were provided by Thirumal Rao. Then we had Ankamma, the lady over there. She was the one who gave lorries. She hired the lorries to bring all the material. And apparently there was another businessman in Penukonda. He also wanted to contribute, but unfortunately he had lorries, but the tires of the lorries were worn out. So another devotee came and said, okay, I'll get tires for the lorries. In many ways, and in how different small contributions they came and helped. Then there was the Narasimha Rao Naidu, whom we spoke about in Bangalore, one of the first few devotees whom Swami visited and who visited from Bangalore. He gets what were called Mangalore tiles. Those days we used to have tiles for roofing. So he gets Mangalore tiles for roofing and Kadapa slabs for the flooring. That was his contribution. And Thiruvenkatam Swami Mudalyar, we spoke about him also a couple of days back. He was the one who provided with the cement, because that was again a very expensive resource. So all these devotees came together and they built this particular mandir for Swami, the first mandir.
When the construction began and it was going on, Swami made a brief visit to Mysore, to this particular place. This is the Karanji mansion, the heir apparent to the Mysore throne. They are hosting Swami, the Rajkumar and Rajkumari, the prince and the princess. And that is the Aras family. The princess was Lakshamani, the wife of Desraj Aras. He was the heir apparent to the Mysore throne. And this is her son, Prithviraj Aras, with Swami, in the gardens of that same Karanji mansions. They welcomed Swami and they said, Swami, you should be staying in place like this, because Swami, you are like a king. And Swami told them, you have no idea, I am going to become greater than the Maharaja. And when Swami stayed at Mysore, so many things happened, because for those few days he was there, many doctors visited Swami. Now, we have heard of patients visiting Swami because they are unable to get rid of their disease or something. Here were some of the doctors who have been treating some patients with chronic problems from years, and they don't seem to be getting a cure. So doctors came to Swami asking, Swami, can you give some cure? What we'll do? And again, govas, vibhuti, watermelon, with different things. So this was a time when many people got their ailments cured, got their patients' ailments cured. It reminds us of what Krishna says, that 4 kinds of devotees come to me. The Artha, those who are suffering. The Artharthi, those who want wealth, want riches, want influence, power, all this. Jignasu, those desirous of knowledge. And finally the Jnanis. And actually the Jnanis ask for nothing, because they know that all that they need to get, they already received.
Swami was doing all this to win the confidence of people around, because we all know, I think at least most of the traditional families knew that life is much more than just living and taking care of this body. But probably to give charge of our life to a person, we needed this confirmation that he was somebody who could handle things far better than you and I can. So probably that's why Swami went around doing all these miracles of cures and materializing. As Arvind was saying, there were interesting episodes of transformation too, and the way Swami brings about that is equally fascinating. There was this young person, his name was Durai Swami, and understandably in 1940s, the neo-rich, they would have been very fond of alcohol and the habit of drinking. So Durai Swami was one person who was very fond of drinking, probably a social drinker who became an addict later. So he started developing chest pain. But Swami never spoke about it. Swami never asked him about that habit. One day, as just a gift of love, Swami gave him 2 buttons from his robe. Swami said, why don't you use this? So he would always wear those 2 buttons in his shirt, right? So what happened was, every time this man would indulge in drinking, invariably he would lose his balance probably, and a little bit of that alcohol would drop on that button, right? Almost every time he would drink, that little bit of alcohol would drip onto that button, or those 2 buttons. So one day when he was in Swami's presence, he just complained, Swami, I'm having this chest pain. And Swami said, yeah, it's because of your drinking habit. And nowadays, not only do you drink, you make me drink too. Right? So now he said, oh God, this alcohol dripping on this button is not acceptable. So what would you do in this situation? So he started avoiding, or probably he would say that, let me drink till I'm still stable. Because you start spilling only after you stop losing your balance, right? So eventually he really kicked the habit, because he did not want to spill that alcohol on that button. This is really sweet. These are the really sweet ways in which Swami would bring about transformation. I remember in 1960s, one of the devotees would come, they were sharing that those days Swami would never say confrontationally, don't do this, I don't like smoking, I don't like drinking. Swami would put it across very, very sweetly. They would notice that if anybody had come to Parthi and they had this habit of smoking, let's say they were outside the ashram smoking and they come and sit for darshan, Swami would still call them for an interview. But after the interview, Swami would go back into his room and start puking. Swami would start vomiting. Swami would catch his stomach and they'll ask, Swami, what happened? And Swami said, no, I called that person. No, he had just had a smoke. I'm allergic to that smell. And this would happen invariably. Anybody who has just had a smoke and come to Swami's presence, that smell, Swami would not eat for the rest of the day. Swami would say, I'm feeling sick. That smell makes me feel sick. So all those devotees who came to Swami in those times who had those habits, at least to not give that discomfort to Swami, they would stop smoking. And Swami would later tell them, see, when you come to me, as long as you don't know Swami, as long as you're not a devotee of Swami, it's okay. But when you make Swami your God, when you become Swami's devotee, what you do is you enshrine Swami in your heart. And Swami said, when you indulge in these habits which I don't like, remember you are suffocating me inside. You would say, I'm sitting there inside, you've given me a throne, you've given me a place in your heart, but you go on indulging in these habits which I'm allergic to. So just keep this image of me suffering in front of your mind. They all see Swami catching his stomach and not able to eat. Swami would say, keep this image in your mind and remember that every time you indulge, this Swami inside is suffering the same way. And a lot of those devotees were youngsters in their 30s, 20s who had these habits. That's how it is. You love something more than you love something else. There is no better way to give up something which you are addicted to.
This is the transformation that Swami brings in. And speaking of habits and addictions, one more little incident. In the interview room, one of the professors from the university, Professor Bhagya, he asked Swami, Swami, how do we give up bad habits? And the minute he asked, Swami just took a piece of paper, rolled it like this, and he thought, oh God, Swami is going to whack me on the head or something. And Swami did like this and gave it to him. And he held it. Swami said, now make that paper straight. So he just took it and he, rolled it and he made it straight. And Swami said, how did you make it straight? I said, Swami, I just rolled it in the other way. To give up a bad habit, develop a countering good habit, Swami told. So don't focus too much on the bad habit. Instead of that bad habit, develop another habit which is a good habit. Just like you roll in the opposite direction and you will be able to give up a bad habit. This was the tip that Swami had given. Anyway, coming back to our story, we showed the photographs of 5-6 people who contributed for Swami's Pathamandiram. One of them was Ankama. Ankama was a philanthropist from Bangalore. She had set up a huge chowdhury which she would lend out to people free of charge. And she used to host Swami at her home. And these are some pictures which I felt are so beautiful, we all must see and enjoy. And once she has even caught Swami napping. The other devotee who was shown there is this Madhoji Rao. Madhoji Rao and his wife Sharda Bai. But Swami used to always call her as Shankaramma. Now they had 7 children who had all died, who were all stillborns, dead at birth. Swami came and told Shankaramma, Shankaramma, you don't worry, you're going to get a male child, it'll be fine, he'll be healthy, I will come and name him also. And this is a picture of Swami at Madhoji Rao's home in the altar there. Again the tiger skin is there. This is a picture of Krishna that Swami materialized for Shankaramma, that is Sharda Bai. Very unique kind of photo. Swami made his way not only into their homes, but fully into their hearts. You know, this is a sample letter that Swami had written to Madhoji Rao. This is one side, this is the other side. Here's the text of that letter. I'll just read it out quickly. Swami writes, Son, I was surprised to see your letter. You wrote what you have never written before. You have written that I have given up my kindness and I have forgotten my poor devotees. Son, don't hurry and make such inferences and think such thoughts. We hardly have any time. Thousands of devotees are coming here. We are sleeping at 4:30 am, eating at 6 am. That is the reason for the delay. I make no distinction between rich and poor, and I am surprised by your conclusions. Son, Swami is telling son, you saw the photo, right? That is the person whom he is calling son. And Swami is telling son, see the next sentence, give the child Shankaramma my full blessings. That is his wife. Tell her my innumerable inquiries. In my letter to Keshav Rao, I have included messages for you also which must have reached you. For 2 weeks now, Tirumala Rao has been with me. He has not yet left. On Wednesday, I went to Sikandrabad. You wanted a bathroom and kitchen to be built at Puttaparthi. Tirumala Rao has returned to them, the workers at Puttaparthi. Both have been completed and built. Narsimlu has been informed. Do not strain yourself. On my account, you are all unnecessarily troubled. Monday 28th, I will be going to Tirupati. Blessings. And down Swami writes a footnote, this letter has been written in haste. Now, this is the kind of sweetness and these are the kind of letters by Swami's grace. When Swami had visited Radio Sai studio, he had told, Anta ikkada vastundi, everything will come here. Today, by Swami's grace, we have received nearly 500 to 600 of such letters from different people, and I'm sure more and more such letters will be coming. Swami has been so loving in this avatar that he has helped to preserve his legacy through various ways, photographs, letters and everything. And he is also blessing that it's all arriving to us at our doorstep. Just to see what he has done physically, I think 2-3 lifetimes will be required.